Okay, everybody, welcome back. After our comedy session, now we're going to speak to someone who was the Personality of the Year in one setting last year, Mr. Gary Bennet, MBE.
Thank you for that introduction. I'll just introduce myself and thank you for inviting me along this afternoon. Unfortunately, I couldn't be there in person, but hopefully we'll be able to answer a few of your questions. Just to give you a little bit background of myself, I was ex-former footballer. I started off my career at Manchester City, was there for 2.5 years. And then I moved to Cardiff City, and then I went on to play for Sunderland up in the Northeast back in 1984. And I became the second black player to represent Sunderland at the time, which was something different, something new, especially for not just for the football club, but for the area itself and for myself, especially with being born in Manchester, is a lot more diverse. And when I signed for Sunderland back in 1984, being a second black player, and also it was basically 90% white in Sunderland. So it was something new just for myself and also for the supporters of Sunderland. And back in the 80s as well, there was a lot of racism going on, not just on the pitch, but off the pitch as well. In them days, we used to have TV programs that used to be on a Saturday afternoon, like The Comedians, Love Thy Neighbour used to be on, Till Death Us Do Part, the Black and White Minstrel Show. I think when you mention some of these programs now, I think especially for the young students, I think they're a little bit lost because most probably wondering what I'm actually talking about. But there was a lot of racism going on in your house, in your lounge from these programs. And unfortunately, it was something which we went along with and we didn't really challenge it. But as time went on, and especially in football, not every team had black players playing or foreign players playing for their team. It was a rarity at that time. And obviously, me playing for Sunderland, it starts off with, shall we say, nicknames. They'll find a nickname for you. Mm-hmm. And then as time goes on, obviously it used to build up. And, the opposition used to get racist abuse as well. And when they were confronted, they would turn around and say, well, our black player is all right, but their black player is this, that, and the other. And using, shall we say, racist terminology. And it was myself as well. As I said, I work for a charity called Choice Red Card, which tackles racism, not just in sport, but in society itself. And I wouldn't be sitting here now and say that I've not been racist myself. I think I have been racist myself. But what I've been able to do, I've been able to educate myself around racism. And then when we talk about racism, there's 4 strands to racism. There's skin color, religion, nationality, and also your culture. And all of us can suffer from racism. It's not just black people who can suffer from racism. People who's white can suffer from racism. And it usually happens to the minority. And it was something which was new to myself, especially coming from Manchester, but going to the Northeast. It's something which it was a rarity for myself, but it was something which started to become happening on a, shall we say, a daily basis. My experiences were, especially when I signed for Sunderland, driving up and down in Sunderland in a so-called nice car. I was stopped about a dozen times and questioned in regards of my name and also what am I doing up here? And then also questioned about, is this my car? Does it belong to you? It got to the extent where it was reported to the club and the club actually had to have a meeting with the police force in regards of that, in regards round the amount of times I was being stopped. Again, we didn't have charities like Show Racing Red Card, or there's another charity called Kick It Out, which supports you now and helps you in regards of educating people about racism. So my was retaliation. So I got sent off a couple of times in matches, especially when any form of racism was directed my way. And that was my way of actually handling it. But, my experiences, and again, it's not just verbal, it could be visual as well. There's places, especially when I first came to Sunderland, if I went into places, if I went into maybe the local public house, or went for a meal, or even went into, shall we say, a showroom. I had experiences where I went into a showroom and I was confronted maybe by 3 salespeople, as though to say, "What are you doing in here? Can we help you?" And I might obviously answer to that was, "I'm here to buy a car," and their answer to that was, "These cars are expensive." So there's certain things, there's certain words, certain way people used to greet you, and again, that might come from even my own manager. Again, when I was greeting my new manager, it would be a case of he'll shake somebody's hand who was white, but at that time he would want to rub his fingers in my hair. And they used to be saying, "Oh, I love the feel of your hair. It feels like a microphone." These are the sort of things which we had to put up with, we had to go along with, and unfortunately, we couldn't challenge it. We talk about prejudices, we talk about stereotypes, and unfortunately, black players at that time were stereotyped in regards of that they had a chip on the shoulder. When it was cold, they wouldn't want to play. So all these things which we had to put up with, and it was only a matter of time as time went on. Football clubs, managers started to, look up above that in regards of the colour of skin, and they looked at the ability. And if they were good, they were signed. Now, I think if you look right throughout the Football League, the Premier League, right down to the Conference, right throughout, I think every team now has a black player or a foreign player playing for their team. And I think one thing which we realised is that, especially when you went out on a football pitch, no matter what your nationality, religion, culture, or your skin colour was, all of us was a team. And there was one thing which you was trying to do is win a football game as a team. And, it was down to education for myself and trying to educate other people as well around racism. And it's strange that on a match day, people who's got a 9-to-5 job, then come Saturday, unfortunately, they turn up at football clubs or football grounds, and it seems as though they put on a mask, and then all of a sudden they get all the stress or all the frustration and all the anger out. And, we talk about discrimination, we talk about all the racist abuse which might be going, all the homophobia which happens on a Saturday afternoon between 3 and 5 o'clock. We'll have it happening this weekend as well, in regards of abuse, which is shouted at individual players. And, comes 5 o'clock, full-time whistle's blown, they walk out of the ground, go home as though nothing's happened. And, we look and see or ask, where does it all start? And sometimes it starts in the home. It starts in the media. Sometimes, people, whatever they read, believe what's in the media. And again, if you hear certain terminologies used at home, sometimes you grow up believing that's the right terminology to use. So a prime example of that is, excuse my language, is maybe the corner shop. Usually turns out people call it the Packies. And there's no shop in the country, no shop in the world which is called a Packies. But because you hear that on a daily basis, you start to believe that's the name of the shop. And that might be coming from your parents, your brothers and sisters, your grandparents, or your great-grandparents or family members. And sometimes you just take that on. And again, terminology does change. You know, again, we're talking about if you was going to describe somebody of my complexion, you know, years ago, they would describe me as being coloured. Now, people say, oh, that was acceptable then. But again, that's something which was created by somebody who was white, because we wasn't white. They said we were coloured. Now, if you're going to describe somebody of my complexion now, it's all right to use the word black, you know, to describe me as a black person. But again, some people are afraid to use that word black because they think if they do, that they are being racist. And again, sometimes you might hear people use racist terminology. That doesn't mean that they are racist. Sometimes what we can do is maybe educate them in regards of that terminology which has been used. You know, it might be something like, you know, going to the Chinese. Now, we know that using the word chinky is a racist terminology to use. Now, if you was in the Chinese and your phone goes and somebody is a friend or a family member and you answer the phone and you said, where are you? You would not use the word chinky inside the Chinese takeaway. So deep down, you know that that's the wrong terminology to use when you're inside the shop. But outside the shop, you would use it or describe it. Oh, I'm going to have a chinkies tonight. So sometimes you do know that is a word which you shouldn't use. And again, we say, if you are in company or if you hear something and you think or feel uncomfortable, then I think it's right to challenge or ask the reasons why they've used that word. Sorry.
That's really interesting. I'm just fascinated what you say about in the stadium, the 9-to-5ers change, become racist, and then go out and then go back to, as you call it, normal. We had somebody here from the Olympics this morning talking about the Olympic Games, and we've always noticed that in track and field, it's the other way around, that there's no colour in track and field. So we have black athletes, don't we, who are British when they're winning gold medals, but they might get, but then, for example, Mo Farah in Rio, when he went to the Olympics there, he and his family, as soon as they got to the airport, they were told they were in the wrong queue because they're in the business class queue because of the colour of their skin. But in the stadium, it's the other way around. So why do you suppose it's inverted for football?
Well, it's not really inverted in football as well. I think we have the same problems in football as well. I've had an experience where I've been lucky enough to be a black manager in the Football League. So at Darlington. And after a game, usually what happens is that there is the boardroom, which you can go into, directors, chairmen, managers. And I remember after one game, I went to go into a boardroom. There's an attendant on the door, and I was stopped from going in. He said, oh, this is for directors, chairmen, and managers. I said, I am a manager. And the look on his face told you straight away the shock. How can you be a manager? Straight away, you're thinking, you're black. Now, again, this happens all the time for me. You know, every time I walk out of my door, I'm always thinking, or hopefully, fingers crossed, that I don't suffer from any racist abuse. You know, there's times when you might be somewhere or you've gone and people are looking on you because, you know, there's areas which is maybe 99% white or whatever, or you might be in an area which is, you know, might have expensive houses. And, you know, people might be on the lookout and are thinking, what are you doing here? What are you walking around for? And they might think, again, that stereotyping, that you might be up to mischief.
Yes, I'm. Some people who are very sad they couldn't make it today would love to have spoken to you or been here and talked to you, because they said how much you've done for the game from when you started. What have you done? Over 350 appearances. at Sunderland, and from the start, where the abuse was in the stadium and bad. We've talked about that yesterday. We won't bring it up again, but it's changed and evolved a lot, hasn't it? And largely, a lot of that's been down to you. People have said, how's it going?
It's going. It's a challenge every day. We've got to keep going. Again, you label yourself. So because I've played football, or you might class I've been a footballer, all of a sudden people look on you differently. They think, oh, it's okay, he's a footballer, fine, great. And it's funny enough, this weekend I was in London and I had to go to Broadcasting House. So I was in there, I was doing a show from there on Friday night. We do what we call a total sports show every single night for BBC Radio Newcastle. And we had to do it from London on Friday. And I've gone in to the reception and we had to approach one of the floors, but we had to go through security. And there was a security woman on the door. And my colleague, my good friend, is white. He was allowed to go in, yet I was stopped and asked for my identification.
Even though you have an MBE.
And again, the person who stopped me, believe it or not, was a black person. Again, we're not always saying that it's a black-white or white-black situation. Sometimes you can have racism black on black.
Yes, I think even though it's early doors, we should, I'm sure this is posing questions for people. Can we break the mold and ask a couple of questions now? Who's got a roving mic? This is really interesting, by the way. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Raj. Thank you so much for joining us. I just wanted to touch on what you just said there about the racism in sport or anywhere where it's colour on, like the same cast, race on the same one. Do you think an element of that is when, say, what happened with you is it's part of, and I think this stems right back to back to the 80s, the 70s, the 60s, 70s, and 80s, where it's trying to be accepted, or it's a bit of validation or acceptance by being racist to your own, your own race is kind of in that situation makes you look like you accept them and you want to be accepted by them. A bit of a playground type scenario.
Yeah. And
if that makes sense.
Yes, indeed. And again, it's funny enough, Raj, lately, one of the biggest, shall we say, topics which I've come across and which I've had to deal with on numerous occasions is rap music. I don't know if you've listened to rap music or any of the musicians who's involved in rap music. Excuse my language, is that obviously the N word comes up a lot. And if it's okay to use, it's the word nigger, which is used a lot in rap music. Now, the big question is, why is it acceptable, some people say, for blacks to use it, but if a white person use it, they're being racist?
Yeah, it's a good question, isn't it?
I don't accept it because sometimes what happens is you'll see black and black and they'll greet each other with fist or whatever it is. It might be, all right, my nigger. That's how, and again, that happens a lot, especially in the States.
That's a term of endearment perhaps for them, is it? Do you think?
Well, it could be. That's what they look on. But again, if somebody come to me and done that, I would be offended.
Sure.
Because my name's Gary. And that's how I would like to be greeted. But I don't know if they're trying to reclaim the word. I don't know how you feel about that. Do you think it's right? Do you think it's wrong?
I think with French and Saunders, the white comedians, one of them calls the other fatty.
Yes.
She's not a fatty, and she can call it that because she's joking, and it's an affectionate term, and maybe this might be one of, in some settings that may be similar. I'm not sure, but I can appreciate why it's an offence in the wrong setting.
Yes, it's interesting when you just, I just touched a little bit on about name calling, and sometimes what happens is that, when we talk about the word nigger, sometimes they get it in first, and it's just the same as you just mentioned there about somebody being fat. So you might know somebody, and his nickname again, that's how it starts. Nickname is Fat Joe. So sometimes he instead of using Joe as his name, he'll turn around and say, "Oh, my name's Fat Joe." So he tries to get it in first before they get it in.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. Is there any questions related to that are out there? Oh, Liam.
Hi, Gary. Thanks for speaking to us first and foremost. When we talk about racism and other forms of discrimination, a lot of the times the burden of education comes onto those who are most affected by it. How do we take some of that burden off when we're having education around racism, discrimination? So it's not black people talking about anti-black racism, Muslims talking about Islamophobia, or Jews talking about anti-Semitism.
Yeah, I think, again, we talk about the curriculum, trying to get it on the school, get to understand, the only way we're going to find out and understand what's right and what's wrong is by educating ourselves or even asking questions, and finding out about other people's cultures, finding out about other people's nationalities, and I think that the quicker we can get it on the school register, then again, that's about educating ourselves in regards of, everything what goes on.
Absolutely. Who's next?
Hi, Gary. I want to go into sports journalism, and I'm sure quite a few people here do as well. And there was a really interesting report a couple of years ago about football commentators, referring to a lot of black players as being pacey and powerful, and a lot of white players being technically strong. And I wanted to get your response to that report and how you feel as a footballer being described in those ways by commentators.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? And again, not just in sport, but just in life in general. I think, you'll be a young person growing up in sport or doing form of sport, and straight away, I'll give you an example. So, in my younger days, you might be out into a wine bar or even a nightclub, and you'll be there, and straight away somebody will be coming up to you and they'll be dancing away in front of you. And then you'd be like, "Oh, what's going on?" And they'll be saying, "Come on, come on." And you're thinking, "Well, I don't want to dance." And then they'll say, "Well, you're a lot of good at dancing." And again, that's that stereotype as well. So straight away, when you see somebody of color skin, and we just mentioned there about the Olympics, and people keep asking that question about when it comes to the final, why is it 8 of the athletes are black? And again, you can go back to Usain Bolt. People say the only reason why he's quick is because he's black, not because he's worked hard to get to that level to win the Olympic gold, but the thing, because he's black, that's the reason why he's quick. And again, in sport, that's straight away. And again, that might be just the norm where they're thinking, you turn up, and sometimes you cannot stop yourself from what we call prejudging. Everyone prejudges, no matter who you are, whatever. It's in our system. We prejudge. A footballer turns up, straight away you'll think, "Oh, wow, I bet he's quick." Why? Because he's black. Oh, by the way, look at that young player there. He's a bit, shall we say, a little bit overweight. Where does he play? Goalkeeper.
Yeah.
So these are the things which straight away you prejudge. I've done a lot of schoolwork, so I'll walk into an assembly. Me and my colleague, who is a female, and we'll ask the first question, what is the difference between me and her? And people say, oh, you're tall. Right, okay. Oh, you're a man and she's a woman. Okay. And they'll go on and on and on. And then finally, they'll turn around and say, you're black and she's white.
Yep.
And how many times have you heard somebody say, oh, they don't realize color. They don't notice color. You do notice color. From the day you're born, you notice color. That's my belief. From when you're born, you notice color.
And do you think, going back to the question about pacey in the report, that your attributes are the same, whatever color, or not?
Yes, they are.
So those commentators have got sort of pre-built-in bias, prejudice. Is that what you?
Yes. Yeah. Well, shall we go back? Was it a year, 2 years ago? We had a penalty shootout, and we missed 3 penalties. Can you remember? Saka, Rashford.
There's lots of yeses going on.
And the media straight away said or mentioned the reason why they missed the penalty was because they were black. Yeah.
We won't go back to Gareth Southgate or any of those other missed penalties, but yes, exactly. So that it comes out when the pressure on.
So we and again, I touch on there was an incident with John Terry. The incident with John Terry and Ferdinand.
Yeah.
A few years ago, and apparently he used racist terminology. And sometimes what I look on or what I listen to is sometimes it's just the norm, or sometimes for some people it's just the norm to, if a foul is given, then sometimes the color comes into it. It's not, if a white person fouls a white person, it's not a color. But if a black person fouls a white person, sometimes the color comes into it. You're black this.
Well, hopefully the VAR will help even that out a little bit.
Oh, it will now. It will now.
So for sports, you next, all right? Paul, can you have the mic next? There's one more question before you go on to yours. So advice for the sports journalists who are training now, what would you prefer them? How would you prefer them to, report what they're seeing? What words do you like?
What words? I think, again, terminology is changing all the time. I think you've got to be very, very careful, especially when you're in journalism and when you're reporting. You've got to make sure you've done your homework. I think it's okay. I think it's all right to use the word black to describe somebody. And again, using the word pacey, I don't know why you want to use the word pacey. You might say he's quick, but that doesn't mean that's not down to skin color.
So you don't want a special vocabulary?
No.
Thank you very much. Right at the back there, sorry.
Hi, I'd love to, get your opinion on something to do with more the modern game. In Spain recently, in the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of incidents related to Vinicius Jr. and more recently Lamine Yamal as well. It seems to me that in Spain, these things keep happening and La Liga and the Spanish FA aren't doing enough about it. So I'd like to hear your opinion on what could the Spanish FA, but not just them, how could FIFA control racism better in stadiums and with fans who are being racist and subjecting these players to racist abuse for no reason?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. I get asked that question quite a lot. And also the question is asked to me is, how does it feel? I know, some people say, oh, I know what it's like. And again, I turn around and say, you do not know what it's like unless you're in that skin, unless you're receiving that racist abuse. Now, you look at, as you just mentioned there, what's happening in Spain, it happens right throughout Europe again. And then when it does happen, and FIFA or the UEFA who gets involved, And the people who's actually handing out the punishment, what are they? You know, you look at the boardroom level.
Mm.
You know, you're looking at people and thinking, oh, I do know what it's like. They do not know what it's like because they're not black. They're not feeling it. It's all right for saying, no, yeah, I can understand. You don't know unless you're on the end of some discrimination. If you're on the end of some racist abuse, then that's something which, you know, you're wary of. And then you're thinking, oh, it can happen again.
Thank you. Your question.
Hi, Gary. Thank you so much. I had a question that's a bit personal. It's about your MBE. So obviously that means member of the Order of the British Empire. And the British Empire has a very crazy legacy with, you know, colonialism, imperialism, especially with the slave trade. And, you know, that kind of continues today with the Commonwealth. And yeah, I just wanted to know why you accepted to be a member of the British Order of the Empire, and what led to that decision, especially when so many prominent black figures in the UK have rejected that, notably Howard Gale, the ex-Liverpool
Yes, I know Howard. I know
yes.
Howard very well. He was a teammate of mine. And I think sometimes that's just down to a personal choice. I didn't get involved in show racing the red car to get pats on my back. I got involved in show racing the red car because I've got a platform. And with my platform, I'm trying to help educate people in regards of racism, what's happened, trying to raise the awareness. And again, you know, hey, listen, if you would have said to me as a boyhood, I've always been intrigued and interested in, you know, on a New Year's Eve, getting up in the morning, putting the TV on and looking at that ticker tape going along the bottom and thinking, wow, look what they've got. This has got. I had no, you know, I didn't have any dreams of getting an MBE. That's not what I got involved in. But hopefully what I believe in that would help raise the awareness. Yes, I understand about the slave trade. I understand about the British Empire. But what we're going to try to do is, okay, we can't keep going back to the past. What can we do going forward?
Thank you. Could you just elaborate a bit more on the Red Card charity that you're talking about, for what you do in that and how you work that through? Yeah,
when I signed for Sunderland, I played in a couple of so-called derby games against Newcastle United, and our chief exec is a big black and white. He's a Newcastle United supporter, and he was, shall we say, angry, annoyed about all the racism which was happening to black players. Newcastle at the time had a black player called Shaka Hislop, who was playing for Newcastle United. He was a goalkeeper, and there's a big petrol station outside St James's Park. And one evening, Shaka Hislop got out of his car, putting petrol into his car. He had his back to three young people, and he's putting them back, and all they could see was the back of Shaka Hislop, and they could see that he was a black person. And they started shouting racist abuse at him. You're black this, you're black that, blah, blah. Finished putting the petrol in his car. He turned round, and then they seen that it was their hero, Shaka Hislop. They ran up to him. Can I have your autograph? And from there, Show Racing Red Card was formed. And then we started using footballers. There was Shaka Hislop at Newcastle United. There was me at Sunderland. And there was another lad called Curtis Fleming at Middlesbrough Football Club. And we started to use footballers as role models, because the minute you mention football, a lot of young people, you know, wanted to listen to their stories. And, you know, we all had different stories. You know, Curtis Fleming, black, but he's Irish. You know, so again, you know, the minute he opens his mouth, people say, oh, a little bit stood back because he's Irish. You know, we've had issues before where I've been into schools, I've been in staff rooms, and people look at, shall we say, teachers as role models. But I've been in staff rooms before, and I've been approached by or hear teachers say, "Oh, what part of Africa you come from?" And I'm thinking to myself, what makes you think that I come from Africa? And then I say Manchester. She said, where in Africa is that?
The old "where are you really from" comment.
Exactly. So automatically, because of your colour of your skin, they automatically think that you're from Africa or somewhere, not from England.
Is that north of England versus the south, or I mean, metropolises London wouldn't be like that now, would it? Is that because there's
it wouldn't be like that now? Exactly. Yeah. You just hit the nail on the head now. Remember when there was like no blacks, no Irish, no dogs.
Yeah.
Was on windows. You look at the likes of, as you just mentioned there, London, it's quite diverse. You look at Manchester, diverse, Birmingham, diverse. The North East is getting diverse now.
So you'd think having you there at Sunderland for so long, it would be better by now. But was it a couple of weeks ago, the Luton striker, was it Elijah Adebayo, got abuse, and that was at the Sunderland game, wasn't it? And I think did he put on Instagram somewhere, is it ever going to stop? Do you think it will stop?
It wasn't at Sunderland, it was at Luton.
Oh, was it down at Luton, playing Sunderland?
I think it was playing Sunderland.
Yeah.
But again, I think if you go to majority of football grounds, even up to now, you will hear racist comments from supporters.
Do you think that's the same in rugby, for example?
It's not the same in rugby, not as much. But again, you look at football and rugby, and football is a little bit more, shall we say, tribal.
Yeah. Yes, yes. I think there's one more, isn't there? A couple more. Yes.
So I live with a learning disability, and on a couple of occasions, and I hate to say this, I've been called out for racism when there's actually no actual evidence, any facts, and I know that I would not say anything racist. I was only quoting a fact about somebody and probably where they're from, not anything to do with their skin and stuff. And I think that's really difficult when then people target you. Even if you're black, even if you're from a different background, even if you've got something that's wrong with you or got a disability, that can be very, very difficult. Is there any sort of things in place for calling stuff out like this, people accusing people when they probably don't know that they've got anything, probably could then justify that there's something else there, when actually it's not that, it's something completely different? Is there any sort of room to work around that as well?
Yeah, and again, I think I touched on it before in regards of having that conversation, challenging, and again, like you've maybe having that conversation with somebody, you might have used what they think is a racist word. And again, talking about it and explaining and understanding, and then you'll think, oh, right, you're right, or I'm right. But it's having that conversation, getting to know, understand people. Why are, again, when I first came to Sunderland, the amount of times you might be walking around, for instance, in a shop, and you might have a child of maybe 4 or 5 and said, oh, there's a darkie or there's a blackie. And you're thinking, right, 4 or 5-year-old, he's saying that. Where did it come from? Where did he pick that up from? And he must have picked it up from home. There might be something which you're using, some words which you're using, and you think or thought that was the right terminology to use. But having that conversation with somebody, it might be somebody who dresses differently to you, somebody who looks differently to you, talks differently to you. Again, we look at maybe the type of food which you eat now. But having that conversation and understanding and knowing, then hopefully that help you educating yourself.
It's really interesting. I love Thy Neighbour and the Alf Garnet that you started this with. Yeah. is where all those terms started to come out. But nobody in this room will have even seen those, I doubt. So
it's funny. It's
being
sorry.
perpetuated somewhere, isn't it?
It's funny. Can I just? Sorry, spare with us 2 minutes. Where are we? I'm just gonna. Is it all right if I use a few words?
Absolutely. We have one last question after that. Then I think that we'll have to wrap it up. So yes, that would be great. Thank you.
I'll just get these right. So there's a few words which used to be said. You don't hear. We talked about the monkey chanting.
Yeah.
Now I think a lot. If you talk about the monkey chanting now, I think a lot of young people will be thinking, "What are you talking about?" But that was something which we heard on a, shall we say, a daily basis, or usually at weekends at football matches. Now, I don't know if any of you have heard these words of wog, sambo, coon, coconut, half caste, faggot, they might use, pikey, fenian, mong. You look at some of these words which was used on a daily basis. You don't hear half of them words now.
No.
But them are the sort of words which was, as you just mentioned, with them shows, love thy neighbour.
Yeah.
Till death us do part was used constantly throughout the programme.
Well, let's hope that comes to an end. In that show, there was snowflake as well, which now means a generation that don't get out of bed. So it's changed its meaning, and words do change their meaning. So I hope everyone here is going to be really careful with yours going forward, that we can make it a fairer and more equal place. Is there time for one more question? Yeah.
I recently watched a drama. I think it was on ITVX. I think it's called Three Little Birds. It covers racism in the 70s. Do you think things like this maybe affects people in a way that they maybe feel a bit too scared to say anything in case if it comes across as potentially racist?
I think so. Again, how do you feel about using words? For instance, describing, somebody like myself, using the word black. Do you feel comfortable using the word black?
Not at all.
Not at all.
I don't. I wasn't sure what to say because I can't remember which ones you can and can't say.
and that, it's okay to use the word black to describe somebody of my complex. And I think that's where we are with words and terminology. Sometimes I think I better not use that word. I'll use something else and use another word so we don't maybe sound racist.
Yes, well, it helps. The dialogue helps, doesn't it? With permission, we know what people. I suppose it's true with other things as well. Homophobia, what people wear, people eat, all those differences that you talk about.
That's right. And again, we're just talking about journalism going into the media, but also we're talking about now. There's obviously the big topic in regards of, especially in football, the amount of, shall we say, females who's actually broadcasting or commentating on the men's game. Now, I think it mostly split. People might think that, it's okay, but then you'll have somebody else because it's different. For a very long time, you did not have, again, women's football has grown and grown and grown. It's huge, but now you've got a lot more, shall we say, female commentators, and sometimes people don't like change.
But when they're the ones who've won the World Cup, I think they can do that, certainly. And we had a conversation about this, didn't we? With the England-Germany women's friendly a couple of weeks ago. Wrighty was on there. Ian Wright was on there, happily doing punditry with the girls. So I think we agreed a mix was fair and we all need to adjust. Good. I think on that note, we ought to leave it. Thank you very much. You've been really interesting. Thank you very much. Please could everyone give a nice...
Thank you.
Thank you.